My silver Toyota Corolla rolled into the parking lot of Willow Creek Country Club, and the air instantly grew tense. Among rows of gleaming luxury cars, Mercedes, Audis, and Porsches, my modest car became the obvious target for ridicule. From a distance, I heard my brother Brandon's irritated voice cut across the lot. Good grief, Riley. Are you trying to embarrass the whole family? This old car looks like something a broke college kid would drive. You're 34 years old, get yourself a proper car. I drew a deep breath, clutching my keys tighter. That 2016 Corolla still ran smoothly, reliable as ever, and hardly the junk he made it out to be. But trying to explain that to Brandon never had any value. He crossed his arms, his tailored suit and sparkling Tag Heuer watch practically screaming that he was the successful one. Next to him, my sister Samantha leaned against her pristine white Range Rover, hair perfectly styled, lips curved into a disdainful smile. Riley, don't you realize people judge the whole family by what you drive? At this club, everyone notices. Showing up in that old Corolla makes it seem like you don't even have a career. I swallowed the sting, steadying my voice. My car works just fine. There's nothing shameful about it. Brandon snorted, his voice sharp enough to turn heads. Fine? Do you know I drove a Porsche when I was 27? By then, I was already a senior manager making over $180,000 a year. And you? Stuck in that nonprofit gig? What do you make 40,000? That's hardly proof you're grown up. Samantha chimed in, tone dripping with scorn. He's right. You cling to that low-paying job and can't even buy a decent house. People will think our family raised someone with no ambition. I bit my lip, scanning the expansive lot. Everywhere I looked, luxury SUVs, designer clothes, expensive shoes. I knew this scene all too well every month my family gathered at Willow Creek Country Club. And every month I became their scapegoat for judgment. As I stepped out, my father Richard stood by the entrance, eyes flicking impatiently at the gold watch on his wrist. Riley, you're 15 minutes late. In a place like this, punctuality is a sign of respect, I murmured. I was finishing a project draft. My mother Elaine cut in, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. Another community project? You're 34. You can't keep wasting time on things that won't build a future. You need to think about finances, marriage, and stability. We walked into the main dining hall. Our family's table sat near the windows under glittering chandeliers, surrounded by the city's wealthy elite. I spotted Dr. Miller chatting animatedly nearby, and further down the Parkers, the family who owned a chain of upscale hotels. Money seemed to hang in the air with every conversation. My mother leaned toward me, whispering firmly, "See? Truly successful people have luxury cars, big houses, solid careers. What about you?" I kept my tone calm. I live in a tidy home, debt-free, and it's enough for me. Samantha arched a brow, letting out a mocking laugh. A small starter house in a mediocre suburb? That's where people live, right after college, Riley. You're 34. Brandon threw an arm around her shoulder, piling on. Success means building assets, accumulating wealth. And you? An old car, an average house. Don't call that success. My fists clenched at my sides, but I forced my face to stay composed. Every word they hurled felt like a blade, cutting into years of quiet effort I had poured in. Still, I knew this interrogation was only the beginning. Beneath Willow Creek's glittering lights, I stood as the outcast, branded by my own family with a single label failure. The clinking of glasses echoed through the dining room of Willow Creek Country Club, but at our table, the tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. I sat under the scrutinizing eyes of my family, listening to them map out my life. My mother, Elaine, adjusted the napkin on her lap, her voice soft yet dripping with sarcasm. "Riley, teaching technology to underprivileged kids may sound noble, but that's not a real career. A 34-year-old woman needs a stable job, clear salary, and room to advance. If you keep clinging to that nonprofit, how can you possibly have a future? Before I could reply, Brandon cut in, his tone sharp like a boss scolding an employee. Let's be honest, Riley, you're wasting your youth. With your tech degree, you could join a major corporation. In Silicon Valley, they pay hundreds of thousands for positions you're more than qualified for. But you chose to bury your talent in little classrooms for nameless kids. Samantha sipped her wine, her eyes gleaming with mockery. Don't you feel embarrassed? We're sitting here with doctors, lawyers, hotel owners, all proud to share about their careers, their contracts, their vacation homes. And you, what can you say? That you make $40,000 a year? Pathetic. My father, Richard, usually quiet, slammed his fork onto the table this time. Enough. Riley, we're not saying this to tear you down. We want you to face reality. An old car, a modest house, and a job with no guarantees. That's not a foundation for the future. You need to think about retirement, about this family's reputation. We can't let others think of you as a failure. I stayed silent, forcing a faint smile. In their eyes, everything boiled down to what could be flaunted: the expensive car, the grand house, the flashy title. The work I did helping disadvantaged kids access technology, opening doors for them, meant nothing in their version of success. Elaine leaned closer, lowering her voice but still loud enough for the whole table. You should listen to your siblings. At Brandon's firm, they're hiring tech consultants. That job would give you stability, no more begging for grants. Or you could apply at Samantha's chain of boutiques, manage her tech side. That's a real job. I glanced at Brandon. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes smug. In their minds, my future only existed as a shadow in their careers. I set down my spoon, speaking calmly. I know you're worried about me, but what I'm doing is not meaningless. I see kids touch a computer for the first time, learn to code, create something with their own minds. That's the value I want to pursue. Brandon let out a loud laugh, drawing stares from nearby tables. Spare me the sob stories. Riley, do you think people respect you for teaching kids? Respect comes from assets and status. Stop being naive, Samantha added, her tone flat but cutting. You keep talking about passion, but what happens when you're 40 with nothing but that fragile nonprofit? People will pity you, Riley. That's reality. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. I don't need anyone's pity. I know exactly what I'm building. Richard shook his head, sighing as though I were a stubborn child. Success isn't about feeling good inside. It's about standing equal with the people in this room. Until you understand that, you'll never be truly grown. Silence pressed down on the table, heavy and suffocating. I felt every judging stare, every sharp breath, like invisible hands around my throat. And in that moment, I realized one truth. My family would never see my real worth unless one day the truth revealed itself so clearly that they couldn't deny it. I lifted my glass of water, smiling faintly. I'll remember what you've said, but let me choose my own path. Outside, luxury cars roared to life one by one, headlights sweeping across the tall windows. Deep inside, a quiet resolve burned within me. If they only measured me by my car or my malice house, then, sooner or later, those very things they dismissed would be what shocked them most. Night had fallen as I drove my Corolla away from Willow Creek Country Club. The streetlights cast a golden glow on the damp pavement after a light rain, and all I wanted was to get home, away from the barrage of criticism I had just endured. But in my rearview mirror, Brandon's red Porsche clung stubbornly to my every turn. I knew he wouldn't let things go until he had said everything on his mind. When I turned down the small street leading into my suburban neighborhood, the Porsche followed. My heart pounded, half anger, half resignation. I pulled into the driveway of my white two-story house with its neat green wooden fence and stepped out. Brandon killed the engine and emerged with the air of a judge about to deliver a verdict. Riley, he began sternly, I followed you here because we need to finish the conversation you dodged back at the club. There, you could avoid it. Here, I want you to face the truth. I crossed my arms. What truth, Brandon, that I don't live up to your standards? He shook his head, his eyes drilling into mine. Not my standards, the standards of society. Look around. A 34-year-old should have a more luxurious home, a car worthy of respect, and a career with real value. You've lived in this neighborhood for 4 years and still haven't upgraded. That proves you're not moving forward. I gestured toward the house. Do you realize I've paid this off completely? No mortgage, no debt, no financial chains. Brandon let out a harsh laugh that echoed down the quiet street. Paying off a tiny house is nothing to brag about. Real success means investing, expanding, accumulating. You're standing still, Riley. Do you really want to spend your life being pitied? I swallowed hard, keeping my composure. I'm not pitied. I take care of myself without leaning on anyone. To me, that's reason enough to hold my head high. Brandon stepped closer, lowering his voice but tightening the pressure. If you truly want to prove yourself, then show me something, anything that counts as real success. A car, a property, a business, something that commands respect. His words landed like a challenge, sharp and deliberate. I stood silent for a moment, feeling the sting of contempt coming from my own brother. His eyes gleamed with certainty that I had nothing worth showing. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out my garage key fob and turned to him. You want to see success? Fine, but don't be shocked when you see the truth. Brandon frowned, his tone laced with mockery. What do you have to show me another old car hidden away in there? I pressed the button. The garage door slowly creaked upward, the motor's hum breaking the stillness of the night. Brandon squinted into the darkness, his face a mixture of curiosity and doubt. I remained still, letting the interior lights flicker on one by one, illuminating what was inside. I knew what was coming, the moment that would shatter everything he thought he knew about me. You asked for proof, I said firmly, my voice steady. So step inside and see for yourself. Brandon hesitated for a few seconds, then strode toward the opening. His eyes locked on the space before him, his expression shifting as the reality of what lay beyond began to emerge. The garage lights flicked on, bouncing off the polished tile floor. At first, Brandon smirked with that same condescending look, but within seconds, the smile froze on his face. Staring back at him weren't more beat-up cars, but 3 gleaming machines, sleek steel masterpieces that looked more like art than automobiles. In the left corner sat a metallic blue Lamborghini Huracan STO, low to the ground, its aggressive lines holding back raw power. Beside it, a silver Aston Martin DB11 radiated elegance, refined and aristocratic, and commanding the center of the garage was a blazing red Ferrari F8 Tributo, standing proud like an unyielding flame. Brandon's eyes widened, his hand tightening around the Porsche key in his pocket. What is this? I stepped forward, running my fingers slowly along the Ferrari's perfect curve, letting the light catch every contour. You wanted proof of success? Here's your answer. He let out a shaky laugh, his voice breaking. You're joking, right, Riley? How could you possibly? These cars are worth, God, at least $500,000. I turned to him calmly. Exactly, nearly $750,000 in total, and you guessed right, I didn't finance them. I paid in full. Brandon leaned against the garage frame, trying to steady himself. No way. You said you worked in nonprofits, teaching kids computers. How could you afford this? I shrugged lightly, a faint smile tugging at my lips. You never cared to ask what I really did. You only judged what you saw on the surface. The truth is, I never needed anyone in this family to rescue me. He circled the garage, his hand trembling as he brushed the hood of the Aston Martin, as though needing to confirm it wasn't a dream. His footsteps echoed awkwardly against the tile. Riley, all these years, you've kept this hidden from the family? I lifted my chin, locking eyes with him. My tone sharpened. Or maybe the family never bothered to listen. Everyone was too busy bragging about salaries, titles, and penthouses. I never cut in, because, even if I had, none of you would have believed me. Brandon spun back, his face flushed. But if you have this kind of money, why still drive that old Corolla? Why live in a normal house? Why let us all think you were failing? I stepped into the center of the garage, standing between the three supercars glowing under the lights. Because I don't need to prove anything through appearances. What truly matters, I already know for myself. I don't need validation from a country club crowd or empty applause. He stood in silence, his breathing uneven. His eyes darted between the cars and me, as though his entire world had flipped upside down. Out front, his red Porsche suddenly seemed small and ordinary. I allowed myself a quiet smile, cutting one last blow into his pride. You've always said success is measured by luxury cars and big houses. Tonight, let this garage be your lesson. Brandon gave a hollow laugh, though his voice trembled. Riley, maybe I was wrong. I never thought you could go this far. I folded my arms, gaze unwavering. Not just a little wrong, Brandon. You and the whole family have been completely wrong about me. For a long moment, silence swallowed the room. The only sounds were the ticking of the wall clock and Brandon's ragged breaths. From the instant that garage door opened, every argument, every mocking word he'd hurled at me had lost all weight. Brandon stood frozen in the garage, his eyes locked on the row of gleaming supercars. He couldn't believe that the sister he had always looked down on could own things beyond his imagination. I walked slowly toward him, the overhead light casting across his face, exposing his confusion and disbelief. You want the truth? I asked, my voice steady and low. Brandon swallowed hard and gave a hesitant nod. Riley, I don't understand. You said you worked in nonprofits teaching poor kids. So, where did all of this come from? I placed my hand on the hood of the Aston Martin, letting out a long breath. You've been wrong from the start. I never worked for nonprofits. I founded them. I run them. His brow furrowed, repeating in disbelief. Run them? What do you mean? I turned fully to face him. Future Bright Foundation, Tech Access Alliance, and Next Gen Learning Initiative, 3 organizations I built. They bring in funding, equipment, and training programs for more than 20,000 kids every year across 20 states. What I do isn't just a handful of small classes. It's a system. Brandon's face went pale. He staggered back a step. 20,000 kids. My God. But that still doesn't explain how you could afford a Ferrari. I let out a small laugh, but my eyes stayed sharp. Those foundations are only part of the picture. The real engine behind everything is the company you never even asked about, EduVision Tech, an edtech firm I founded 8 years ago. We design educational software and training solutions for schools, corporations, and government agencies. Brandon's eyes widened. A company, yours? I pulled out my phone, opened the dashboard, and handed it to him. The numbers glowed across the screen. Contracts with over 1,000 school districts, dozens of major corporations, and federal agencies. Last year's revenue was $64 million, with over $30 million in profit. That's the real source of these cars and the house you thought was just a stopgap. His mouth hung open. 64 million? Riley, the whole family, never knew. I cut him off. Not because I hid it, because no one ever listened. Every time I tried to speak, the conversation was drowned out by bragging about case wins or boutique sales. I chose silence because I knew if I spoke, you'd dismiss it as fantasy. Brandon collapsed onto the garage step, fingers clutching his hair. I was wrong. We were all wrong. I sat across from him, my eyes softer now, though heavy with hurt. What stings isn't the insults. It's that our family never valued anything beyond money and reputation. In your eyes, opening a door for a poor child to touch a computer for the first time meant nothing. To me, that's the measure of success. He stayed quiet, breathing hard, his gaze darting between the cars and me like he was seeing a stranger. Riley, you've built and maxed for entire empire and none of us even noticed. I nodded. And I'm not done, new contracts are waiting. Harvard, Stanford, even the Department of Education has put its trust in me. I don't say this to brag, but if you need undeniable proof that I haven't been standing still, this is it. Brandon clenched his fists, bowing his head. I have nothing left to say. I thought I knew what success meant. But everything I've prided myself on is nothing compared to what you've done. I rose to my feet, gently pulling the garage door closed behind us. There's no need to compare. Just remember this. Some values can't be measured by a Porsche or a luxury watch. Open your eyes wide enough and you'll see the world is much bigger. Brandon looked up, hesitation flickering in his eyes. For the first time, the arrogance I'd always seen in him gave way to something else, guilt. Brandon sat frozen, his hands clenched tightly together, his eyes locked on the phone screen I had handed him. The contracts, revenue charts, and client lists glared back at him, landing like a punch to his pride. This can't be real, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I rolled my chair closer from the workbench in the garage, sitting directly across from him. It's completely real. Last year, EduVision Tech brought in more than $67 million in revenue, with $31.8 million in net profit. Not numbers I made up, these are audited financial statements. Everything is transparent. Brandon's eyes went wide as he leaned back against the wall. 67 million, good lord. I swiped across the screen, pulling up our partner list. We have contracts with over 1,200 school districts across the US, including New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. On top of that, 87 Fortune 500 companies. And we're serving multiple Ivy League schools, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth. Signed and active contracts, totaling about $347 million over the next 5 years. Brandon let out a hollow laugh, stripped of all pride. Here I've been bragging about real estate projects, about my Porsche, without knowing you've been signing contracts worth hundreds of millions. Riley, why have you kept quiet all these years? I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. Because if I said anything, no one would believe me. You, Samantha, Mom, Dad, you only hear what you want to hear. To the family, I've always just been the stubborn girl who didn't understand what a real job was. So I decided to let the numbers speak louder than my words. He bit his lip, eyes glistening as though fighting an inner battle. You built all of this yourself? I nodded. Since I was 26. I started out renting a tiny office in Austin with friends, working off a couple of old laptops. Back then, I still drove the Corolla to meet clients. They laughed, said educational software would never make money, but I didn't quit. Small projects piled up, until now we're present in nearly 50 states. Brandon covered his face with one hand, sighing heavily. I never imagined how hard you must have worked. To me, you were just my broke little sister. And now, I walked over to the wall display of patents, certificates, and awards. I pointed to one in particular. This is the patent for our adaptive learning algorithm. It's currently used in more than 117,000 classrooms, helping students progress 3 times faster than traditional methods. Here's the Innovation Award from the Department of Education, and this our official partnership with NASA for STEM training programs. Brandon looked up, his eyes glassy with shock. I can't believe this. Riley, you're changing the entire national education system. I gave a faint smile. Not just the nation. We've expanded into Canada, Australia, and 16 European countries. I'm not telling you this to boast, but so you understand, when you and the family said I didn't have a career, I was actually building a technology empire. He braced himself against the table, stepping back to take in the room, the screens running real-time data, the small server racks humming in the corner, the whiteboards crowded with strategy diagrams. Riley, I've misjudged you all along. For the first time in my life, I've never felt smaller. I stepped closer, my voice firm. You don't have to feel small, Brandon. You just need to rethink how you measure others. Success doesn't come in one form. For you, it might be houses and cars. For me, it's millions of students gaining access to modern education. Both have value, just expressed differently. He stood in silence for a long time. Finally, he nodded, the arrogance gone from his eyes. I was wrong. I thought I was the family standard, the one everyone should look up to. But the truth is, the one we should all be proud of is you. I looked at him, my heart aching yet lighter. After years of being dismissed, at last, a crack of recognition had broken through. Brandon stood frozen in the garage, the numbers I had just revealed still spinning in his head. He drew in a deep breath, then looked straight at me, his voice raspy. Riley, if everything you're saying is true, then what's your net worth right now? I walked over to the desk in the corner, powered up the large screen connected to my personal data system, and pulled up a clean, clear report. About $94 million, I answered without hesitation. Brandon staggered back a step as if the floor had shifted beneath him. 94 million? I nodded. That includes the company's valuation, real estate, investment portfolio, and liquid assets. The number fluctuates with the market, but it stays in that range. He pressed his hands to his head, struggling to process it. I can't believe this. You, the sister we all thought lived frugally, holding wealth like a top investor. I shrugged, keeping my tone calm. You only ever saw the Corolla and the modest house. You never looked at what was behind them. I led Brandon out of the garage, through the garden path, and to the separate two-story building tucked among old oak trees. Want to see where I actually work? He nodded silently, still reeling. I swiped my card at the door. Bright white lights flooded the interior, revealing every detail. Server racks humming in a climate-controlled room, screens streaming real-time data, workstations lined with advanced testing equipment. This lab costs $3.8 million, I explained. Brandon nearly froze hearing the number. This is the heart of EduVision tech. Every piece of software, every project gets developed and tested here before we deploy it to thousands of schools. I didn't rent some fancy downtown office. This is private and secure. Brandon wandered the space, his eyes darting to the rows of patents and awards covering the wall. His hand trembled as he touched a framed plaque. Innovation Award, U.S. Department of Education. Riley, the family never knew. I folded my arms and leaned lightly against the desk. They never knew because they never cared to ask. I chose silence and let the results speak. He sighed deeply, then looked at me. You have all of this, so why keep working with nonprofits? Why not just focus on making money? I smiled faintly, glancing at a photo on the wall, a group of children beaming in a computer lab my foundation had built. Because money was never the only goal. Over the past 8 years, I've put nearly $42 million into tech education. We've built 48 labs in underfunded schools, given more than 150 full scholarships, and trained hundreds of teachers. That's the pride that really matters. Brandon stood speechless, his arms hanging at his sides. The arrogance in his eyes had vanished, replaced by remorse. I've judged you wrong for so long. We all have. Riley, you've accomplished more than the rest of us combined. I turned to him, my voice steady, resolute. I don't need comparisons. What I want is for this family to stop measuring people by cars or zip codes. Success comes in many forms. For me, it's seeing a child gain the chance to change their future. He swallowed hard, as if wrestling with himself. His gaze swept across the lab once more before he whispered, I don't even have the words. You've built an empire, Riley, a real empire. I stayed quiet, a storm of emotions rising inside me. Brandon stood in the middle of the lab, the glow from the monitors casting across his face, stunned, ashamed. For years, he had bragged to others about being the pride of the family, yet the truth was that the sister he dismissed had built an entire tech empire. He drew a shaky breath, his voice trembling. Riley, I don't even know what to say. I judged you so harshly. I thought luxury cars and penthouses were the measure of success. Compared to what you've built, all of that feels hollow. I smiled faintly, stepping closer, my tone calm but firm. I don't need flattery, Brandon. What I need is for you and the family to understand that a person's worth can't be measured by a Porsche or a penthouse. Real success is when your work changes other people's lives. Brandon lowered his head, staring at the polished floor. I'm sorry, I was blind, caring only about appearances. I even shouted at you in that parking lot, humiliating you in front of everyone. I don't deserve to be called your brother. I touched his shoulder lightly, my voice softer. Don't torment yourself. Just start seeing further ahead. Think about the future, not just yours, but of those you can help. In the end, it isn't the logo on the car that matters, but the legacy we leave behind. His eyes lifted, filled with genuine regret. Riley, you've invested in things I never imagined. I've only ever built wealth for myself, but you've poured tens of millions into giving thousands of kids access to technology. I've never done anything that meaningful. I took a step back, meeting his gaze. You can start now. Success isn't just in the past, it's in the choices you make today. If you truly want to, use your resources to create change. Only then will you understand the feeling I've had all these years. Silence settled in the room. Then Brandon gave a firm nod as if making a vow. I will change. And I promise I'll never again judge you or anyone by what they drive, what they wear, or where they live. Relief washed over me, a small smile breaking free. That's the lesson I needed you to learn. Because all those things you prize, the flashy cars, the high-rise condo, are just shells. What remains in the end is the impact we leave for the next generation. Brandon rubbed his temples, still shaken as he looked around the lab. I thought I understood success, but now, seeing you, I realize how shallow I've been. You've proven that humility and vision are the real power. I nodded slowly. I still drive the Corolla not because I can't afford more, but because I refuse to turn life into a race of showing off. I choose simplicity so I can focus my resources on what truly matters. Brandon let out a rueful laugh, shaking his head. I swear I'll never mock your Corolla again. In fact, it deserves more respect than my Porsche. It's been with you through the entire journey of building your empire. I chuckled, feeling lighter than I had in years. At last, you get it. When Brandon left the house, the porch light spilled over his red Porsche. For the first time, he didn't walk tall with arrogance. He left quietly, carrying something new in his eyes. I stood in the doorway watching him go, a strange feeling swelling in my chest. After years of being belittled, finally someone in my family had listened. But I knew this wasn't the end. Sooner or later, Mom, Dad, and Samantha would also have to face the truth that Riley, the one they dismissed, was the one rewriting what success truly meant in this family. Riley's story reminds us that success isn't always displayed through luxury cars or grand houses. In real life, many are judged by appearances, while true value lies in the lasting impact they create. Riley proved that persistence, vision, and dedication can transform a small job into an empire with far-reaching influence. That lesson still holds true today. Believe in your chosen path, because the legacy you leave behind is the ultimate measure of success. What do you think about Riley's journey from being underestimated to proving her true worth? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and emotional family stories.